Hey folks, this is Cindy. Thanks so much for stopping by. In today's video, I'm guest designing for Inkon3, and we're going to be talking about how to color a cute unicorn. This stamp set is the Magical Unicorn Samp Set, and I am so totally over the moon for this. I can think of so many different ways you could color into this stamp set, and it does have several sentiments in it, so you can definitely get different occasions out of this. I just love this. So I'm going to dive right in here and get started on my card. I have expressive blending card cut down to 4¼ inches by 5½ inches, and I have the Magical Unicorns right there in the center. I'm going to be using the Inkon3 Fadeout ink for this. If you follow me at all, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of this ink. I love how when I'm done coloring, you can't even tell that I have any ink on my card panel because this really does fade out over time. I did stamp this about 3 or 4 times so I could have a solid enough image or dark enough image that you could see what I was doing when I was coloring it. Typically, if I'm going to color something in for myself, I don't stamp it that many times. Regardless, it'll still fade back and you won't even know that I have inked lines on my image, which is what's so great about that ink. I'm starting with the Copic E35, and I'm going in where I want my darkest shaded areas to be. I'm right up there on the tip of my marker because I need to keep these lines pretty thin. I will go back in and stretch these lines out a little bit more in flicking emotions, but for the time being, I'm just mapping this out, seeing where I want some of the shade to be. Now that I'm happy with where I have it, I can start adding more of this and kind of darkening this up just a wee bit. I'm going to go right up around this nose, down there on that lip, where that hair is over, or her mane is hanging over her face. I did add some there. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. I don't want too much of this because I am actually going for a fairly light colored horse here. I did almost forget to add the dark gray Stettler pen around this eye, and if I had colored over the top of it with my Copics, I would have lost the eye, so I did stop myself and make sure that I added that. I did choose a dark gray as opposed to a black. Black would have been way too stark for that eye, and the dark gray was perfect for it. Once I was done with that E35, I'm coming in with this E33, and I'm going to go right over the top of that 35, stretch that out just a little bit more. I still have tons of white space left on my unicorn. However, I do have a few more colors to go through here. When I'm done with that E33, I'm bringing in the E31, going right over the top of that 35 and the 33, stretching that out just a little bit more, but as you can see, I still have plenty of white paper left. Now, you don't have to leave the amount of white paper I am. In fact, if you wanted to make this a completely brown horse or a darker brown horse than what I am, you just fill all of this in. You're just going to make your colors whiter. You're going to add more of each color than what I am. I just liked the idea of having a lighter colored horse because I knew that I was going to make her mane dark, and I also knew that I was going to make those flowers dark. In fact, I planned the flowers before I planned anything else and built the rest of it around the color of those, but I'll talk about those more here in just a moment. When I was done with that E31, I brought in the E30 and brought that in quite a bit more, including around the bridge of this nose. However, I'm going to knock some of that back. I'm going to blend some of that back just a wee bit more with my colorless blender. I'm starting on the white of the paper and taking it to the color, not starting on the color and taking it out to the white of the paper because I don't want to model that color. I just want to kind of blend it in just a wee bit more. And then I'm going to let that dry and kind of eyeball it. I might come back in here soon and go over that. On the nose, I did go in with the C5, a C3, and a C1. Once I had those colored in, then I'm bringing back in this E50, and I'm going to take that E50 up into those nostrils to kind of tone those back a little bit. It's going to add a wee bit more warmth to them and kind of help them blend in just a little bit better with the rest of the horse. Now, you could use warm grays on this instead of cool grays. I couldn't find my warm grays, so cool grays it is, and I improvised. Now I'm going to start on her mane. I'm only going to show you a portion of this mane, folks, and I struggle with explaining on how I do this because hair and manes are something I just do. I don't necessarily think about them, so hopefully you can follow along here. I'm starting with the E59. This is going to be a fairly dark mane. I'm going in with that E59 and I'm adding that up underneath where the leaves and the flowers are. I'm also following the illustrated lines of the mane, but then I'm adding some extra lines. Some of those I'll keep parallel to the illustrated lines. Others I'm going to add, but I'm also going to meet them up with other lines that I've already colored in. Hopefully that makes sense. And as soon as I move my hand, you can probably see what I'm talking about there. And then I'm going to color those in, kind of make them a little bit fatter. Those are going to create some darker shaded portions in this mane. So there's going to be lots of variation in color. It's going to look like there's a lot of movement going on here. So not everything looks so flat. Once I was done with that E59, I'm coming in with the E57, going right over the top of that E59 and stretching that out a little bit and adding a few more lines here and there. Once I was done with that 57, I'm coming in with the E55, going over the top of the 59 and of the 57, and again stretching that out a little bit more. You can see that there isn't a whole lot of highlight left here, folks. I don't need a whole lot. I just need a little bit to show that there is a little bit of highlight, a little bit of texture and movement, and I'm going to add some more detail yet when I come in with my colored pencils. I did leave this one here closest to her face a little bit too light. I didn't like how light that was, so I'm coming in and knocking that back just a wee bit with the 53, but I'm being careful to leave just enough of an edge on that hair right there because I do need just a little bit of separation between her face and the mane. I just don't need it to stand out like a sore thumb. Okay, now that I am done with that, I'm going to start working on this horn here, and I'm going to start with the Y28. I'm adding this where the flowers are overlapping the horn itself. There's going to be quite a bit of shade there. I'm also going to start adding this Y28 where those diagonal lines run down the horn itself. So I'm going to make these look like they're a little bit more rounded. So there's quite a bit more texture in the horn itself. Now I'm coming in with an YR23. I'm adding that YR23 where those flowers are overlapping the horn. Again, there isn't a whole lot of light there, so we don't need any highlights in that. And then I'm coming up again towards the tip of that horn. I did make sure that as I was flicking up, my flicking motions were longer, and when I needed to flick down, I made sure that they were shorter. That's going to kind of add a little bit more dimension to these. It's going to make them look a little bit more rounded. I also made sure that I added that YR23 along down the edge of the horn, so it kind of looks like it rolls back and we actually have a three-dimensional horn on the top of the unicorn. I finished that off with the YR21 and then I called it good. I'm going to add the rest of that detail with my colored pencils when we get there. So now I'm going to color in these flowers here on the side of this headpiece. I'm assuming these are plumerias, so I'm going to color them in as if they are. I'm starting with the RV13 and I'm going in where they meet there in the center, but I'm making sure that I leave the ridge of the flower. I'm making sure that I leave that white until I come in with the R20. I want those ridges to look like they're going to stand up and out, and you'll see that quite a bit more when I do my colored pencil work on them as well. I'm only going to do a 2-color blend on these flowers. They don't need a whole lot. They're pretty tiny. So I don't need to add a whole lot of color to them. And again, I'm going to be bringing in my colored pencils and you'll see what happens to them when that time comes. I knew before I even started coloring in this image that I wanted different shades of red and pink. So for this flower, I'm kind of going a little bit more on the pinkish side, but not as pink as those flowers that I had originally done. I'm starting with the R22 and I'm adding this where I want my darkest shaded area to be. So any petals that overlap the other right up there where that bigger, larger flower is overlapping this one, I'm making sure I added that there. And then I'm going to blend this out with R20. Now, when I did this, I was just not paying attention. Let's be honest, I wasn't paying attention. So I didn't blend this out very well, and that was shame on me because then I have to work a little bit harder with my colored pencils. I didn't catch it. I didn't correct it until I started with my colored pencils, and then I thought I'd just go ahead and use my colored pencils, and it was a mistake. It made things a little bit harder. So do be sure that you got a really good blend here, folks. before you even get to your colored pencils. Don't make it harder on yourself. I did finish that off with an R00, and then I called it good. On these leaves, I'm going to do G29. I'm going in again where that darkest shaded area should be. I also bring that G29 down one edge. That's going to add a darker shade there so it looks like it's tilted away. I blend that out with the G24. Now I have a YG21. I'm going to go right over the top of that, and then I'm going to call it good. On these leaves here, you could absolutely do the same color combination that you had done on the first set of leaves, but I thought I'd mix it up. And this time I just added a B34 and then a YG17 and a YG03 and called it good. Now on these flowers here, I want these to be a deep, bold red. They are a very large flower compared to the rest of them, and I really wanted these to stand out quite a bit. And I knew that this red combination would be perfect for that, so I'm starting with the BV23. I'm going in where the base or the center of this flower is. I flick that out towards the edge of the petals, and I'm making sure that I vary my flicks pretty well. You don't want a wall of color, and with the BV23, even underneath something as dark as an R29, you're going to see it, and you'll see that wall of color. So make sure that your flicks are nice and varied, that they are not all just stopping at one spot, because you will definitely notice that. One of my favorite things about this stamp set is the sky is the limit with the color palette, folks. Seriously, you think of it and you could do anything you want. It's already a fantasy image, so you could actually go for the gold on fantasy colors. You could even make this headpiece a rainbow. You could start on that flower there by my thumb, and you could work your way over to the right-hand side of it in a rainbow of flowers, and that would be so awesome with a white unicorn. It would be groovy. You could have a purple unicorn. You could do anything you wanted with this, and I just dig it. I am usually a one and done kind of girl, and I was so excited to see this because my brain instantly came on and it just wanted all of these different colors. I chose these because the recipient is a very girly girl, and I knew that these colors would be appropriate for her, but again, you could do so much. After I had put down that BV23, I went in with the R29 right over the top of that BV23, stretched that out just a little bit. As you can see, I still have plenty of white space. However, I don't want a lot of highlight. I'm just preserving that white space because I do want the edges of these petals to read a little bit lighter, and you're going to see more of what I'm talking about here in just a moment. Now I have the R27 going over the top of the BV23 and the R29, bringing that out a little bit. There were some of those edges on those petals that I hadn't gone in with the BV23 or the R29, then I'm adding the R27 to it now. It gives it a little bit of variation in color, and also it separates some of those petals from the others so you don't have a bunch of dark back to back. That's a great way to lose definition. This is a really good fix for that because it keeps some of those colors separated and it keeps the images separated. So I'm just going to go in and make sure that I have enough of that R27 in there, make sure I'm happy with that. Now I can bring in my R24. This part's kind of fun because right there in the center, you can just kind of go for the gold. You do want to make sure that you have a good blend on these colors. And I did try to make sure that I blended these out really well because, again, I didn't want to have to work so hard to color these in. And because these are so big and bold, they're going to stand out the most. And if your blending isn't good on them, folks are going to notice it. So I'm making sure that I'm giving each of these petals a really good coat from the center towards the tips with this R24, and then I can call it good. I'm going to color those other two flowers that I have left exactly the same way, exactly the same colors. I also don't show you how I color those centers. I just stippled in some C7 and a C5 and a C3, and then I called that good. They don't need a whole lot of detail, just a little bit of texture, and you're good to go. Now I'm going to come in with my colored pencils. I'm starting with the Prismacolor in dark brown. I have a very sharp pencil and a super duper light hand. I'm just going in pretty lightly. I'll build up this color where I need it to. In most places, I don't need to build it up too much, but I do want to be careful because I don't want this to be a dark brown horse. I don't want this to be super dark in itself. So I'm making sure that I'm keeping my hand really light here. I can continue to build this up as I go, but I don't want to have to try to get rid of it. Sometimes I'm guilty of pushing my boundaries with sharpening my pencils as I'm coloring, but I'll tell you what, on this particular image, folks, I really made an effort to make sure I was sharpening all of my pencils frequently and keeping them super sharp. I need those details in this. There's a lot of clean lines and there is some cleanup to do in my coloring, and having a sharp pencil really makes sure that I get those clean lines and really helps me get things cleaned up. This is the Prismacolor in Burnt Ochre. This is a little bit on the warm side. You could use a light brown if you wanted. I liked the warmth of the burnt ochre, especially because I had some of those reds and pinks going on up there, and I have this pink background, so I really wanted that warmth. When I was done with the burnt ochre, I'm coming in with a Prismacolor in beige, and I'm just using this to blend out a little bit more in to that white, so I have a little bit more of a smooth transition. See how far back I'm holding that pencil, and I have it pretty well on its side. That is giving me a really nice light sketch. I can still control how much pressure I'm putting down there, and when I get down here to the tip of that nose, I'm going to apply a little bit more pressure because I do want that to be a wee bit more shaded, but overall I'm making sure that my hand is real light and I'm building up that color. I'm going to clean up the nostrils here. I started with a cool gray 70%, went to a 50%. Now this is a 30%. Once I have all of those in there, I'm going to go right over the top of all of that with that beige. That's going to help warm that up a wee bit. You could use warm Prismacolors. I didn't. I don't know why. I just didn't. But I can warm this up a little bit with the beige, and that's perfect. I also do the same thing with those ears that I did on those nostrils. I just repeated the same thing. The only thing I did was skip that 70%. I didn't need to go quite that dark, but I did use a 50, a 30, and then went in with that beige. So now I can start coloring in my flowers here. I'm going to start with these set of flowers right here. I'm coming in with the Prismacolor in Black Grape. Black Grape is a pretty dark pencil, folks. So I am not adding a lot of pressure. I don't build this up too much, or try not to build it up too much, but I do have to fix some of this blending. And that's okay. I will address that more here in just a moment. An alternative to the black grape would be a dark purple. You're going to notice a difference between the dark purple and the black grape here in just a moment. I'm going to use the dark purple on those plumerian. You're going to see a big difference, aside from the fact that I have different base colors on these flowers. After I'm done with the black grape, now I have the Prismacolor in Carmine Red. I'm going right over the top of that black grape and stretching that out a little bit more. And here is where I have to start addressing some of that blending. I wouldn't have needed to bring out that Carmine Red as much as I did here. The whole idea of colored pencils is just to add detail, not to recolor your whole entire image. So that's part of the reason why your blending is super duper important. At the end of the day, it wasn't a big deal and nobody probably notice if I never even said anything. However, just keep that in mind when you're coloring, folks. Blending is so important. I'm also making sure that I'm stopping and sharpening my pencils frequently, because this is also where it's important to keep those nice, crisp, clean lines. These petals are going to be nice and clean, and you really want that to come across with your coloring, and your pencils will definitely help a bunch in that. Okay, so this is where I am using the dark purple. I'm going right in where I would have had that RV13 and along that ridge line there. Again, super sharp pencil because I need to have that line nice and clean. When I do start to bring it out a little bit where it V's at the center of that, I'm just using really tight circular motions and a very light hand. I'm going to go over the top of that dark purple with the Carmine Red. I had used the Carmine Red over there on those other flowers all over the top of that black grape and the R22 and the R20. So I got a different color out of that as opposed to this RV13 and this R20, and mixing it up a little bit with the dark purple. So I'm not using a whole bunch of different pencils, but I'm getting different results, which is really groovy. For the red flowers, I'm going to start with the dark purple on this as well. I'm going right in there where I had that BV23. I am adding a few more flicks and strokes with a colored pencil on some of these petals that I hadn't with that BV23. It adds just a little bit more texture on the inside of those. If you don't want to do that, you absolutely don't need to. This is going to definitely help push that shade in some of those shadows back just a little bit further. It's going to make this flower look that much more dimensional. It's going to start looking like it's popping up out of the headpiece, and that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. When I'm done with the dark purple, now I'm coming in with a crimson red. I'm going right over the top of the dark purple and blending this out just a little bit more. Crimson red is actually a pretty solid match for R29 and R27, so you're not going to see a huge difference. There is just enough of a difference, though, that it definitely looks really cool. It also helps reinforce some of those lighter shaded areas that I wanted with just that R27. I didn't want to go too dark there. So the R27 was perfect, and then going over the top of it with the crimson red helps push that just a wee bit deeper without going too dark. Again, I'm going to color those two flowers on the other two flowers here on this headpiece in the same color as I've done this one. And then I can get started on coloring in her mane. And it's going to be pretty surprising with what I do here. I am going to start with the dark purple, and the reason why I'm going to use the dark purple is because this is going to help me get to that brown darker than what I could go with just a brown by itself. And I don't want to use gray. I don't want to use black. The dark purple helps me get to that point without making these colors look super flat. So right now you can already see how much darker that is getting in those areas. Wait till I bring in the dark umber. You're going to see how much darker it goes yet. And then I can use that dark umber by itself, and I'm still going to get a darker brown, but it's going to be lighter than what it is with the dark purple and dark umber combined. So here is the dark umber, and look, I'm going to go right over the top of that dark purple. Look how dark that is, but it's not black and it's not gray. It still has that warmth to it. It does not look flat at all, and I love that, but I can still add this in areas that doesn't have any dark purple in it, and I get that beautiful darker brown color. Again, it's not gray, it's not black, and it's not flat. It is just wonderful. I'm going to use this to help reinforce some of the movement in this hair. I want it to look like it is flowing a little bit. It's definitely not windblown, but we're definitely going for flowing, and that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. So now I can start coloring in her horn, and I'm using the dark umber on this. I have a super sharp pencil and a crazy light hand. I don't want this to read brown. I want it to read dark and shaded where the gold would be. Surprisingly enough, I'm going to put brown on this, and I'm still going to get a gold horn. It's going to be really cool when it's done. Now, to keep this from looking a little on the cool side, I am going to be bringing in the Prismacolor and Terracotta. It's a little bit of a warmish red going over the top of this dark umber, plus the Copic coloring underneath it is perfect. I know that there's other combinations out there for gold. This is the one that seems to work the best for me. This is the one that I like the most. Plus, I'm also thinking about the colors that I have around it when I chose my colors. I did add some Prismacolor and cream to those highlights, and then I can call it good. I'm really excited to share this with you. This is the Inkon3 liquid pixie dust, and it comes in this glass bottle and it has a dropper. I'm going to put some here on my acrylic block, and then I'm going to take the Inkon3 water brush and load up the brush with this stuff. You could also put it inside the brush. This is exactly like a Nouveau Aqua Shimmer or Spectrum Noir clear overlay pen or Wink of Stella. However However, you have more options with this because of it comes in this liquid form with the dropper. I think this stuff is just groovy. It doesn't necessarily have a gold tint or a silver tint. It's pretty neutral, which I love. I also love that this doesn't come off on your fingers. So once this dries, it is permanent. It's on there. It doesn't shed. It doesn't bleed. It doesn't spread all over the place. I dig it. In fact, the pixie dust that I had left over on this block, I let it dry and then I came back to it and ran my finger over the block and it didn't come off on my finger, which I love. How cool is that? And here in just a moment, I'll pick this up and I'll tilt it in the light and you can really get an idea of what that shimmer looks like. Unicorns and pixie dust are like peas and carrots. I just love it. All right, folks, that is it. We are done. We are good to go. I have more details and links down in the description below, as well as over on my blog and Inkon3. I have the full-length, real-time version of this video available on my Patreon. That will also be linked down below, so do be sure to go check that out. I hope you enjoyed my project today. If you did, hit that like button and share it with your friends. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and tap that bell next to the subscribe button so you can receive all future notifications. Thanks again so much for stopping by. Until next time.